Hi, I'm going to talk about a few topics that I've noticed haven't been talked about quite often, and one of them would be the topic of daughters of narcissistic fathers. I find that there is not enough resources looking at this angle because, as I've talked about in my former videos regarding narcissistic abuse from a mother, there is little to be said from me and from others on the angle of dealing with a narcissistic father. I find that a lot of cases are quite extreme, usually overt narcissistic fathers who sexually abuse their daughters, or other aspects where they appear grandiose in such ridiculous manners, which, whilst I do think does happen, in my case it's not so much quite straightforward, because one thing that isn't talked about in the narcissistic community is, has anyone considered what it would be like if you had a narcissistic father or parent that has been made by the other narcissist or forced to go on antidepressants or medication for their supposed mental illnesses? I find that it's not often talked about, and it seems like a rare situation to see a narcissist evolve under the influence of very heavy drugs such as Prozac or lithium, which have proven to have very nasty side effects, which I can confirm. I've grown up my entire life almost with a father on antidepressants, so I've never seen him smile or act normal, and at times I've seen him literally vegetate and just stare out of a window for hours at a day. Either that the dose was too strong, or he did not need medicating in the first place. And that in the last decade or so, he switched antidepressants onto something a bit more adaptable for him. But I find that growing up, that medication in some ways has been always used as a threat against me, especially being the scapegoat, and maybe certain other family members, if there was no supply being gained through those means. Another angle I would like to talk about, which also seems very unlikely, is I haven't found much before I discovered narcissism over the last decade or so on the internet, through psychology books or anything on the internet regarding reverse sibling abuse, because the usual scenario is usually the eldest child, especially of a large family, seems to be labelled automatically a bully, especially if they are the scapegoat. However, I find that I never got into fights, or I never attacked anyone unless I had been provoked or wound up constantly. And of course this got to me when I was much younger, but it seems it's another topic that is also not discussed, is the element of younger siblings physically abusing or verbally abusing their older siblings right until adulthood, which I find very, very strange. So I'm wondering whether or not to make videos dealing with the dynamics of my younger siblings, who some of them, one of them now being an adult, is potentially a narcissist. And I'm wondering whether or not to make separate videos on dealing with a narcissistic father from potentially a little known angle, who has been heavily medicated most of his life. So I'm thinking of doing that in separate series, because even just doing one video explaining the dynamics of narcissism or sibling triangulation could go on. As I am from a large family, it seems impossible to squeeze all the things they've done, all their behaviours, based on all the siblings. So I'm wondering even if I should just simply do videos on each sibling separately, which in itself seems to be a task, because I am struggling myself with discussing my experiences in a chronological way, because I have said, not in videos but in messages and comments, that I'd like to make videos dealing with also religious dynamics and issues regarding narcissistic parents who've gained supply through religion. So there's all these angles to deal with, and I'm not sure which one to start with. And I was just wondering if it is possible that even though I've heard that siblings, younger siblings especially, if you are the scapegoat, can be in some cases united in a form of, I don't know if it's genuine, friendship against the scapegoat once the scapegoat leaves. Because in most cases I've heard that, especially from large families, even if they are golden children, they are almost all triangulated against each other, isolated from against each other, and there is no chance of developing any form of friendship or closeness towards siblings, as in this case my mother, and it seems rather common, narcissistic mothers will and can triangulate all the siblings against each other in a divide and conquer tactic. And I'm wondering if, instead of the younger siblings automatically becoming a potential scapegoat, if in reality that, if it's possible that all the siblings, especially from a large family, can combine, and that once a scapegoat leaves, especially if the mother feels that she is losing supply, if as they are growing into young adulthood or beginning or finishing teenage, that they can be reunited all together in pairs as close friendships, but to the point it just seems engulfing, especially if some of the siblings are narcissistic or unhealthy themselves. I'm just wondering if they can be united against the scapegoat. This is what I'd like to know, because I have read very little information on this. I've only read that once the scapegoat leaves, they are automatically, in some cases, seen as potentially to be used for hoovering tactics, and maybe potentially given a certain place to become the golden child, because automatically it seems the parents will make the one or several younger siblings the scapegoats. This may be the case, but I feel that it's not quite a complete picture, and in my situation I'm just wondering if they can all be combined, and that I'm just wondering if the parents can use this as a means to encourage them to have no privacy or no boundaries with each other, and instead encourages them to have a very toxic situation where they will hold back from, especially after the scapegoat leaves home, they will hold back from abusing each other outright and instead work together